Alternative Reality, Volume 1, Chapter 11. Loud thumps like the beating of a heart echoed loudly across the chamber, drumming in tandem with Whale's erratic breathing after that wild chase. Frowning, he shot back a glance at the shut doors behind him, as if to make sure the sound was coming from there and not his own chest cavity. His adrenaline was through the roof, after all. Suddenly, the door moaned loudly as the wood paneling seemed to creak and crack, bulging outwardly as some great pressure assaulted it from the other side. Whale almost cursed aloud. It wouldn't hold for long. The horde would soon be upon them. Time to find an alternative route. Doing his best to calm his breathing, Whale took in his immediate surroundings. It was a large round chamber that the group had found themselves in now. The interior illuminated by light that seeped in through a hole in the domed ceiling. It seemed like the hall itself served as some sort of an auditorium, as it was divided into two main layers. An upper one, where Whale's group was present, which descended in tiered rows, angling along the bottom tier like a great big crescent. Whale's eyes darted over the rows, taking note of the rotten fruit chairs and benches there, his mind drifting back to his university years. And then there was the lower part. At the very bottom of the chamber, it gaped like a big maw, and Whale's eyes narrowed at it. He expected to be met by the sight of the podium, yet all he saw was the familiar mist, which rolled about as if alive, sliding over protruding bones, yet obscuring everything else beyond that. Oh, how exciting. As for a means of escape, two immediate exit points came in sight. A shrouded in darkness archway straight ahead, which led to unknown depths. That was option 1. Option 2 was a broken down door to the right, which looked like an entryway to some sort of a closet. It looked, simply put, unimportant. Clearly not the way deeper into the dungeon. Did the game think he was fool enough to be tricked into checking what was there in such dire circumstance? It was then, timely as ever, that the said door creaked open and 4 new individuals shuffled into the auditorium. 3 blood-smeared onion soldiers and a figure shrouded in a dark green cloak behind them, a large bow clutched by delicate fingers. As soon as their eyes met, the new group seemed to freeze in place, as if the sight of Whale and his happy-go-lucky band of law-abiding citizens was too surprising of a sight. It didn't take long for the situation to escalate. Without preamble, shouts were heard, arrows were fired, and the 3 soldiers charged at them in full thrall. All 3 shots were aimed at Whale, who darted down like a startled rabbit, the arrows flying way off mark. "Bastards," he spat, and his anger flashed in the form of fireballs that were quickly lobbed over in response. Bitter as the magician was, he didn't even bother with the little ranger and instead concentrated on the oncoming soldiers. Already, one of them lit up, a roar of pain escaping the poor bastard as he flailed about desperately. Sadistic as ever, Whale flashed his crooked yellow teeth in satisfaction, too happy to be self-conscious, too proud of his good aim to remember he promised himself to never do that again. Willow followed the guards through thick and grim, mumbling under her breath all the time. Onion Trio. Those buffoons picked the most treacherous paths, thick with growth, barely accessible terrain, next to no visibility, even for her eyes. By now, she figured that they did so on purpose, just to drag her down to their level of sight. Considering that they could barely see at all due to those ridiculous helms, that demanded extreme circumstances. They went on like so for most of the day, cutting through the forest and its inhabitants alike. Their uniforms have long since lost their glimmering white, so smeared with grime and blood they were. Willow had a suspicion that the trio enjoyed this in more ways than one, and boy was she regretful of ever involving herself in this ridiculous quest. Chasing some bounty, taking orders from these primates, seems like be it outside or inside reality, things just didn't go too well for her. Not recently, at least. She'd get through this though, and if luck would have it, she'd see her three companions burn. As unlikely as that was to actually happen, she'd at least savor the idea, for now. Eventually, Willow was led into some narrow cave entrance, as if the forest wasn't dark enough. By the looks of it, they entered some dungeon, but asking the three idiots for answers was a futile attempt. They couldn't differentiate west from south, yet they seemed so sure on where to go. A little more, and they'd simply go through walls to their destination. It frustrated Willow to no end, and it got to the point where she even considered just shooting them herself. There was only so much a beautiful young lady could take. After spending a few more hours navigating through narrow caves and strange corridors, encountering barely any life, they walked through an old rickety door and finally came into an opening. A large round chamber. "Bloody finally!" she exclaimed at the sight of sunlight that seeped into the chamber from above. Yet she wasn't the only one who reacted to the sudden change of scenery. Her lovable companions began their own show, their thickest stepping forward and pointing at four individuals that stood further away. "There, brothers in arms, our long trek is finally at an end. Let justice be served," he exclaimed loudly, glancing at his two fellows standing on both sides. His thicker-than-thick friends obviously nodded energetically in consent, and without much preamble, charged ahead like bulls seeing red. "For the king!" they shouted in unison, the weird acoustics of the hall morphing the words into something incomprehensible. This was the last straw. Willow didn't even care who they were chasing after anymore. For what crime? Are the people she was shooting at now their actual targets? It just didn't matter. She let loose 3 arrows at the robed figure that looked like a mage, who seemed to be the most aware of the situation. To her frustration, she missed. Her eyes had gotten used to all that darkness she had to endure all day, and the sudden light seemed to have inhibited her accuracy somewhat. No matter. Instead, she got to see how one of her favorite trio was set on fire. Seeing him running around like a candle, screaming all the while made her sneer in satisfaction. Soon, the hall exploded in a heated melee scuffle, with her forces outnumbered, and the magician doing a good job of being irksome with all the cover fire he provided. Things weren't looking too good, and a part of the room was already ablaze. As another one of her arrows missed him, Willow was beginning to feel mildly annoyed. Why couldn't that bastard just stay still and die like he was supposed to? Agitated, she quickly shifted targets and shot one of the bandits through the shoulder and then the leg. Poor bastard didn't even have enough time to lament the misfortune, as the onion soldiers opposing him finished the bandit off in quick succession. Either emboldened or pressured by the sudden shift, the remaining bandits seemed to surge forward with redoubled effort, as if in an attempt to wrest back the advantage. Yet as another one of them was impaled by Willow's accurate shooting, those efforts looked to be wasted. Her thoughts were already on how to divide the loot, and if this was the bounty she was after, which was probably why she was too late to notice the fireball coming her way. Panicking, she leapt out of the way and crashed through an old bench, just barely managing to avoid the projectile. Yet as she rose, lips twisted into a scowl, she quickly realized that her dodge wasn't as successful as she hoped. Her cloak was on fire. Fuck, fuck, fuck! She swore loudly, hands going up and down to try and put out the flames to little effect. With a frustrated growl, Willow quickly discarded it before the fire could spread any further and gave the accursed mage the most vicious glare she could manage. This was personal now. That was her favorite cloak. She slowly notched an arrow, aimed, drew, and was about to reduce the number of wizards in the world. Sadly, though, it was not meant to be. As she was about to let loose, a sudden explosion shook the whole hall and sent her and everyone else stumbling to the ground, the arrow flying way off mark in the process. Disorientated, Willow didn't even have the time to consider getting up, as burning splinters and body parts rained around her, forcing the ranger to huddle down even more. Once that was done, she slowly got up, fitfully inspecting what caused the sudden chaos. Her mouth almost opened up from shock. Where there stood the great big gate before, now nothing more than a smoldering hole remained, the superheated stone outlining it glowing deep red. A creature of fire and brimstone stood at its very center, an avatar of fire, something that damned mage might have worshipped, maybe. Bright red flames engulfed its skeleton form as it slowly walked into the hall, stepping over charred gobbling parts in the process. This was getting out of hand. Way out of hand. She turned to glare at the damnable mage that was only now getting back to his feet.
None shall pass.
The creature then roared like a demon, reminding a certain magician of a certain someone that was briefly met not too long ago. Shit, was the mage's reply to that. Quite an apt description of the situation, Willow was loath to admit. She watched as his remaining companions scattered to the winds at the sudden development, the onion soldiers being no exception to this. Swearing aloud, the mage hesitated just a second before turning to follow good examples. Unmindful of his surroundings, he leapt down the few auditorium tiers, his direction leading him down into the lower part of the chamber, a gaping archway at the end of his destination. "Oh, no you don't," Willow grumbled with narrowed eyes. She slid her bow around the shoulder and drew a fancy dagger, golden, with luxurious engravings, as if its beauty would calm the souls of its victims. At this point, Willow didn't care much about her purpose here, the bounty all but forgotten. Her eyes were fixated on nothing but the mage, as she shifted into a reckless sprint straight at him. Poor cloth user, the dagger would slice through him like butter, and Willow savored the image with a smile. Somehow, that moment did not come, however. As the mage finally noticed her approach, he turned to her, eyes wide, a fireball coming to life in his right hand as a last resort. Once she got a good look at his face, Willow's pace faltered and her own eyes went just as wide. "You?" she shouted in a mix of exasperation and utter astonishment, and proceeded to trip, knocking into the mage with enough force to send both of them flying in a tumble of limbs. Into the lower section they fell, through the mist, but instead of striking cold hard stone, they flew into a pit waiting beneath, a pit with a bed of spikes at its very bottom. Not the most pleasant end. Willow closed her eyes and braced for impact. Hopefully, it would only take a moment.